Hey guys, back again with another 48th scale Revell aircraft kit. This time we'll be looking at their Me410B kit. Let's open it on up and take a look. Now, one item note, since this kit is from Revell's ProModeler line, is that it does include a frit of photo etch parts for the cockpit, as you can see here, as well as the radar antenna. Now, the radar antenna in particular will dramatically improve this kit, as in the day, plastic simply cannot get as fine as photo etch can for details such as this. So this is a major nice inclusion. The cockpit, while not necessarily needed, is also a nice inclusion. So good job there. So getting into the sprues now. Starting off, we've got our canopy parts, as well as a couple other odd-in parts. There is a fair amount of flashing on these parts. Obviously, these are from an older mold. A lot of the detailing is slightly overscale, but is serviceable. For the should not be too difficult to mask those edges off, thankfully. However, given just the complexity and the amount of masking you need to do, I would say it might be worth it to splurge and get a masking set just to save you some time and headache. As the one downside of aircraft like this from this era is that they do have this intricate framework for their canopies, and it does make masking much more difficult. So, moving on, as this is a twin aircraft, we've got our two props and prop hubs. Nicely done, even though most of that won't be seen behind the hub. We've got our two gun setups, as well as our tail guns. The guns themselves, unfortunately, are kind of poor in terms of detailing. Again, another area, if you really wanted to, I'd say this might be one to consider for getting aftermarket barrels for. Of note also, they do include the larger 30mm cannon barrel with this kit, even though they do not provide the rest of the parts. Would have been nice that they include the sprues for that, just as a nice added gotcha, but fortunately is what it is. Moving on to the upper wing surfaces themselves. Detailing is all right. Fine recessed panel lining, and a couple of raised details, but those raised details do seem a little overscale and bulbous. The exhausts for the engines are included in this sprue as well. Unfortunately, they're not drilled open, so that is something you would have to do or go aftermarket for. Moving on, we've got our wheels, two pilot figures, which are actually very nicely done. I would say if you don't use them for this, they're worth probably saving and using on a different project. Additionally on the sprue, we've got our main gear, which are serviceable for this scale. I would say they're definitely fine. Obviously, if you want to go for or aftermarket for those, you can, but as is, they're fine. We also got our cowlings for the engines, seats, and a couple other odds and end parts, as well as our main underwings. And interesting, though, and I think this is a bad molding example on my copy, as we don't see it on this weird little standoff. References I've seen don't show it, so I'm going to assume it's just some issue with the mold. But yeah, beyond that, underside much the same in terms of the detailing as the upper. All serviceable for this scale. And do gives you a bit of a sense of size as well. Last up, we have our two fuselage halves. Again, this is short-bodied aircraft, but decent-sized wings, as well as our cockpit details, which by themselves are not bad. I'd say even without the photo etch, the cockpit is more than serviceable. Obviously, some areas could be slightly better, but it's not something I'm going to complain too much about. So good job there on Revell's part. We also have our control surfaces. And overall, not too terribly much here. So let's move on to the decals now. Now, the decals are typical Revell decals. They're a little on the thick side, but color illustration most part is good. I would say the reds and yellows could be a little brighter. However, everything else is fine. You do get a couple different marking options, including, interestingly, a captured British bird. So that is a little interesting. So it does give you an option you wouldn't typically see that often. Now, moving on to the instructions. Now, this is where I feel the kit does fall a little, mostly because it's a much more complicated build sequence, in part because of the photo etch. Though the photo etch will add a lot of value and detailing to the kit, it is going to make it a lot more complex, though, especially here in the cockpit. Obviously, once you get out of the cockpit, though, things do pick up and get a little easier, as after that, everything sort of just falls together. Last sort of area that might give you some trouble would be some of the more detailed bits into the wings and obviously some of the landing setup. But overall, it's not too terrible a build. I would just recommend taking your time with that cockpit. Now, obviously, also having to do the photo etch antenna will also give you a little bit of a challenge, especially given the angles you're going to need to get. But again, with a little care, and obviously if you can get through the cockpit, this should be a little easier. As I mentioned, you've got several different marking options. They do give you the marking for the RAF, though that's just a change in the roundels. Lastly, so you got our paint key and stencil placement to close things out. So overall, this kit has been around for a while, but I would say it's not bad. The include photo etch does add a little bit of added value and challenge to it, but overall, it's a decent kit. Its strengths do get set back a little by some of its weaknesses, but overall, it's a decent all-around kit. And one I would say, if you're into World War II aircraft, it's definitely worth picking up. Plus, at about $30, it's not going to break the bank. So that was a look at Revell's 1/48 scale Me410 from their ProModeler line. Good overall kit, and can be had at a decent price. So, until next time.